Hello and welcome to Lean in Leander. I'm your host Andrew Naudine, and this is episode 16 of the podcast. It's also the 7th in the Vote in Leander series. Now, if you happen to be stumbling across the podcast for the very first time, welcome. I hope you enjoy what we're doing here. One of the things that we're doing is this series I call Vote in Leander. And the Vote in Leander series is essentially a series of episodes where I sit down with each of the candidates one-on-one and ask them some kind of generally personal questions. Where they're from, where they came to Leander, what they do for a living. We don't stray too much from that. We do touch a little bit on some of the politics involved because, let's be frank, they are running for public office. But for the most part, what I try to do is highlight a little bit more of the personality of each of the candidates so that you as a voter have a little bit more information available to you as you make your decisions. It's not to say that the politics aren't important. It's just, this is just a little bit of a different take on how you get that information out. And I hope, again, that you've enjoyed what we've done here with the series. We do have all 10 candidates slated at this point, and hopefully we'll have everybody scheduled and interviewed before the end of the month. Now, Vote in Leander also has another objective, and that is to get the vote out. As I've said here on previous podcasts, only 3.5% of the population of Leander, Texas, has historically voted in the elections. With a population closing in on 70,000 plus, we need to increase that number. And I believe it's your civic duty to participate in elections of all kinds, but especially your municipal elections, the local ones, because those are the ones that affect the way that you live day to day for the next 10 to 15 years. It sets here in Leander the tone of what the city will look like and how it will grow over that same period of time. It's the fastest growing city in Texas and possibly still in the United States. And so we want to make sure we do things right. So part of my effort is to make sure that you participate in selecting the representatives on City Council that will lead part of that process. So be informed, be aware, and vote. VoteinLeander.com gives you plenty of information on when you need to vote. It also gives you information on how you can vote. So there's registration information there. You can check your registration status. You can even sign up for some reminders. So take advantage of that. It's a real easy to remember website, VoteinLeander.com. I hope you'll do that. Now, without further ado, this episode I had the opportunity to sit down with current Place 6 representative, Marci Cannon. Now, Marci's been on council for the past 3 years, and she's running for this, the first time, for re-election. And I sat with Marci at Sharksburger over on Reagan. Thanks, Dino, for giving us a couple of minutes on the counter. I appreciate that. But what we were able to talk about is a little bit more, hopefully, about Marci, because I think people know who she is. I think she already has somewhat of a presence in the city. Again, she's already on City Council, so people know her that way. But if you're not familiar with the people on City Council, you might recognize Marci. She's been in the area of Leander for 20 plus years. She's also served on several commissions and committees that have been involved in the development of Leander over the past 20 plus years. So her story I thought was interesting. There were a few insights there that I had no idea. I didn't know that of her. So it was nice to be able to get that type of conversation going. And I think you'll enjoy it as well. I found it to be illuminating and insightful. And she had some interesting things that she brought up during the conversation. I hope you'll find that that's the same for you. Now, if you're watching on any of the video streaming opportunities, Facebook, YouTube, etc., please feel free to grab a drink. This is about a 30-40 minute conversation. If you're listening on podcast, turn it up a notch. This is Lean in Leander, and I hope you'll enjoy today's episode. And welcome. We are at the famous Sharks Burgers here on Reagan, and I had the opportunity to sit down with Marci Cannon, who is the current Place 6 council member and is running for re-election.
I am.
So Marci was nice enough to give me a little bit of her time today, and I thank you so much for doing so.
Thank you.
All right. So
Marci is a little bit more well known than some of the other people
Am
that
I?
I've talked to. Yeah, I would think so. I mean,
Nobody knows me anyway.
oh, come on.
No, I'm serious.
Come on. No, I think people know who Marci Canyon is a little bit
Okay.
more than other people. Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
We'll make it fair. Because you have been serving on the city council for the past
3 years.
3 years. Okay. So this will be your first run for re-election.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So with that, obviously anybody who's attuned to the elections would understand that you're the incumbent.
Yes.
All right. So that's what I mean by that.
Okay.
But aside from that, you have a lot of experience in the area.
I do.
And I did want to touch a little bit on
I
that.
do.
So,
I say I'm the oldest living resident here. One of.
who's on council, maybe?
Who's on council?
Yeah, we'll qualify
Okay.
that one.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Yeah, that's better. That
Okay.
makes me feel better.
Yeah, see? All about making you feel better, Marci. Okay, so I know that you've lived in the Leander area for about 30 years.
Yeah.
So what first brought you to Leander? Like when you first got here, was it an early move in your lifetime, or?
Well, I went to high school in Georgetown.
Oh, okay, so you're not too
Yeah.
far away.
Yes.
All right. I didn't know that.
Yes. And I got married very young, and we moved to Austin for a short period, and then back to Georgetown, and then about 20 years ago moved to Leander, over here on the east side where there was nothing,
at
not
the
even
time,
Ronald
right.
Reagan.
Yeah, no, I can
was
totally
nothing,
imagine.
yeah.
I mean, as much as it's changed in just 3 years since I've
Right.
been here, 30,
Yeah.
that exponentially larger
Yeah.
change.
Definitely.
So you've been able to kind of see things happen and watch
Absolutely.
things happen as they do.
Absolutely.
Now, what first attracted you to Leander? I mean, obviously Georgetown to Leander is not a big
Right.
leap, but
Part of it, honestly, the school district,
Okay.
and we wanted some land.
okay,
And at the time,
that's what you
of
could get.
course, now you wish you would have bought a lot more land. But yeah, so we were, just out there off the county road, and moved our kids from Georgetown Berry Creek Country Club. So it was quite a shock for all of us.
So how many kids do you have?
I have 2.
I'm assuming they're grown now.
They
too,
are grown.
Right? Okay.
They are grown. My daughter, I don't know, I lie about her age so much because it makes me sound old. I think she's 27, 28.
Okay, I do the same thing with my daughter
Do
and
you?
son. Trust me, I can
Like
either
it.
give them an extra year or take one away.
Yeah, I just sometimes just don't even mention her. Just say I have a college kid. No, I'm kidding. And then my son Max is 22, and he is still in college.
Okay, and where is he attending school?
Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in
that's
Daytona
interesting.
Beach. Yeah.
So, pilot, Air Force, what's the plan?
Aeronautical engineering.
Really?
Yeah, mechanical, aeronautical,
Very
aerospace, I guess is what they call it. Yeah,
So-
my dad was an Air Force fighter pilot in Vietnam.
Okay.
And my son's dad is a helicopter pilot, and so he kind of was just ingrained with that. But his bent has always been engineering. So he just wanted to go to the best school for aerospace. So that's it.
So he builds planes, is that what he has in mind?
Yeah, he'll design. Yeah.
Rockets, I mean,
Yes. Oh, you should see
there's
the
so much
stuff.
stuff now. Oh, I know, it's crazy.
I kept Home Depot in business with him growing up because out on land you can build just about anything.
Oh, yeah, I can maybe imagine that a little bit. I did a little bit of like one of those rockets when I was younger.
The potato gun?
Yeah, well, not the potato gun, the actual rocket.
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
we built
okay.
the 3-stage.
Yeah.
Shot it out
Yeah.
and had a parachute and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That was I was really interested in that when I was a kid. One of our friends, when I was growing up, his dad was similar. I think he was in aerospace.
Yeah.
But my friend, he's a friend of the family's. My mom was really well acquainted with him. He's at NASA now.
It's awesome.
So, I mean, but he was super smart too. He was a super smart guy. And I tried to keep up for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't keep up after a while.
I
didn't have the discipline. I probably could have,
No.
but I just didn't have the
No, I call it voodoo. Like my son will talk to my dad about, I don't know, differential equations or thermodynamics. I don't know what it is. But I'm listening and go, I think you're talking about like magic. I don't think that's real. And they both roll their eyes at me. But yeah, he's always been into building things that explode. Things
Right?
Yeah.
I
So
like to blow things up too,
Yeah.
so I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. And your daughter, what does she do?
she went to the Culinary Institute of America in New York
Very
City
cool.
out of Hyde Park and
Very
got her
nice.
bachelor's there and worked for Four Seasons. They hired her junior year in college. And then finally got her, she worked at the Four Seasons in Manhattan, the downtown brand new one, and then finally got her moved down here to Austin. And so she just recently got married. and she's the assistant GM for Jeffries.
Oh, okay.
And
Very nice.
yeah,
Very
yeah.
cool. So culinary too.
Yes.
I'm a foodie, so I love
that's
all
great.
that. And I worked in the hospitality industry.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, for about 10 years, 10, 12 years.
It's hard.
That's why I'm not working in the hospitality
It's hard.
industry anymore. So the fact that she was actually taken out of college, like selected out of college to start, that speaks
Yeah.
volumes for her skills. And
Yeah.
especially the Four Seasons.
Right.
That's a tough gig to land.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
a really, really tough gig.
Yeah, she did the Palm Beach location, the brand new Manhattan one across from the Oculus.
Right.
So, she's got a lot under her belt.
That's very cool.
It is.
That is
And
really,
she feeds
really
me
cool.
well. So
I was going to say, I was like, you're not lacking. I'm sure she gets a little sick of having to cook when she comes home, but still. Now, I have friends who, again, I dabble a little bit in the culinary arts. I have several friends who are chefs now.
Oh, yeah, nice.
One of my best friends is actually, he's a director of culinary arts. I think he's in Carolina now. I forget where he is, but he does he's actually one of the people who inspired me to do my podcast.
Really?
Because he does one with, he cooks. And
that's awesome.
So I started following him, and I'm like, well, if Tim can do that, I can
Then
do
I
that.
can
do that. I'd like to kind of, at one point, maybe do like some episodes that are Anthony Bourdain-ish.
Oh, that'd be
maybe
nice.
Dina will let me in the back
Oh,
and cook a couple
maybe.
burgers. You never know.
You could cook for me.
It would, well,
I don't like to cook, but I do like to eat. So
I'll buy you when I'm cooking burgers.
Okay, there you go.
There you
There you go.
That would be our compromise. Because where I was headed with that was like, I love cooking, but I don't like cooking for people.
Yeah. So
Because it's hard.
It's
hard. It's like a lot. It's a lot of work, and you don't. If anybody says it, the thing is I'm super sensitive to any criticism.
Oh.
So it's not a good chef trait. Like, could use a little bit more salt. I'm like, what do you mean you could use a little more salt? Your daughter could probably relate.
Oh yeah. She cooked all growing up. So my kids are 5 years apart. So she was the second mom to Max. He hated my cooking, but would eat anything she made. So automatically, boom, you're it. You get to cook. So she still does that.
My son's learned how to cook a little bit now.
Yeah,
He'll call me.
Yeah, it's funny because my son's now doing that. I think it's because he must have dates, but he won't call me. But he'll call my daughter and say, "Okay, I'm at the store. What do I buy?"
No, he's dating.
Yeah, he's definitely dating. He's not cooking for himself.
I remember the very first when I had a girlfriend, not my wife. It was a girlfriend well before I met you. The first thing I made for her, I cooked a dinner for her, was duck almondine.
Why would you take that on?
I was trying to impress her.
Well, I guess. Did it work?
It was good.
It was good. Okay.
I mean, I nailed it.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Anyway, all right.
That's funny. Yes.
Enough about that. So, and again, that's kind of what I try to do. I'm trying to help you relax a little.
Okay,
I can
thank
tell
you.
You're a little nervous,
I am.
All right? So it's fine. But the point is that with what I'm doing with Lean and Leander is really to kind of let people see a little bit of who you are,
Sure.
as opposed to the person who's running for office.
Yeah.
And in doing so, hopefully give people a little bit of a different insight, a little bit of a different angle on who you are and your personality and stuff.
Sure.
Like that. So I appreciate you participating and telling people about those things, because I don't think a lot of people know that.
Yeah. No, probably not. The thing is we never moved our location, yet we were constantly redistricted because Leander was growing so quickly. Mm-hmm. So, like, my daughter went to Vista Ridge High School. My son went to Rouse. We stayed in the same spot. We went to Blockhouse, Pleasant Hill, Parkside, Wiley, and the two high schools, Henry Middle School, and I'm trying to think, I think there was one more. And we've never moved. And
you probably do better just naming the schools that you didn't go to.
Yeah, probably not. So, yeah, my whole world was wrapped around the kids. And we had a little tank out there. We would stock with fish. And so when they were in elementary, we would do field trips out to our place, and the kids would fish. And,
very cool.
So just, I love Leander.
Right.
They made, well, of course, they educated my children very well to go to these two nice schools and hopefully one day provide for me, right?
That's always the plan.
Yeah. But the community, just the people, different sports, all, school involvement, a lot of school involvement.
I would imagine like you did the PTA,
all of it,
and all of that kind of stuff.
My son was big in theater and soccer. My daughter was dance and very involved in our church youth group. So, a lot of teens in my life, and I loved it. So I kind of miss that.
Yeah. When they fly the coop, I mean, you kind of, as an empty nester, as a fellow empty nester, it's kind of nice.
On one hand, yeah.
But at the same time, there's those periods where you're like, and you'll see something. It was to relate. Who was I talking to the other day? We were talking about Little League or softball or something.
Yes.
And I was thinking about, because my son was heavy into youth sports. Soccer was his.
That was ours.
My daughter was the drama student.
Oh.
She swam before that, so.
A little bit of all of it.
I was kind of thinking about that while they were talking, and I was like, okay, the relation there, and I couldn't, like, I noted to myself, I was like, you know what, I don't know Little League in Leander.
Right.
I don't know, a little bit, I know soccer in Leander a little bit, just because I do still do that. But it's things that you should get to know, I think, because I had some exposure through this vehicle to Girl Scouts. I know a little bit more about Girl Scouts now, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And I need to learn about Boy Scouts and a couple of the other things that are going on, because I want to be able to feature those as well here, and let people know. But you, as someone who's grown up in the area, you've been able to see those changes go on over the years. I know that in your professional life, you specialize in commercial land sales, land use, zoning, and entitlement. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're using
kind of
that skill set,
yes,
I imagine, quite a bit on council. I mean, these are things that you rely on, right?
Absolutely. And honestly, that's what spurred me on to even run in the beginning, in the first place, because I was part of the founding members of the Reagan-Palmer Corridor Association.
I was going to bring that up. I'm glad you brought that
and
up.
now, I think we became official in 2006, but we were meeting before, and it was a group of landowners along the Reagan Corridor, in excess of 3,000 acres of representation, and we were having a hard time getting any attention on the east side. We're like the stepchild over here on the east side, and so we banded together, and we were able to get utilities along Reagan just by really pressure on the city, like, hey, you have a huge resource over here. And our goal all along was quality, sustainable development. We wanted to see Reagan be like 360 with the nice employment centers and of course residential, but we wanted to make sure that we utilized this thoroughfare as best as possible.
Now, was that particular group at all, I don't want to say involved because it's really not the right word, but were you in any way consulted or consulting on, say, like the toll projects and things of that nature?
No, because most of the people involved were landowners on Reagan.
Okay.
And so that was kind of our focus. Now we had board members that served on CTRMA. We had some pretty high profile people, and I learned from them. I started with them, learned from them, and then shortly after that, I was appointed to do the comprehensive plan update, and that was 2006, but it took us 2 years. So It was 2008 when we were finally done, and that's when I was sold, hook, line, and sinker. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. It's fascinating. I love it. And so really, all my experience has been in land. And then kind of land development. So, I would sell a parcel, and then they would have problems getting permits and getting through entitlements and getting their zoning. And so a couple months later, they'd come back to me and say, hey, can you help with this? Because I guess I just learned a lot. So then I started doing that. Once I won election, I no longer can do any of that entitlement work in the city of Leander. So, of course, that's a huge sacrifice for someone who's self-employed to cut out my major.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is where you live.
Right.
So, I mean, your familiarity and your network would be the strongest in this area. So that is somewhat of a sacrifice, and something I didn't know about you. I had no idea
it's a huge sacrifice to then do work outside.
So is that, I'm assuming that's Leander proper, you can work in
Oh,
the
sure.
outskirts, so
Yeah.
you're doing stuff in Liberty Hill
Right.
and stuff like that.
Right, out Georgetown, Cedar Park, Austin even, so all, different places.
So within obviously the terms with council are 3 years, so over the past 3 years you haven't been able to do that.
Correct.
And you're still re-upping for another 3?
I know. The reason why I really ran was because there was this movement at the time with previous administrations to build domain-type developments at every intersection. High density, walkability, all of that. Well, we were all totally green at that time. And then around 2016, 2017, the city, knowing that the state legislature was going to change the involuntary annexation, came in for a massive land grab. Like I want to say over 8,000 acres, involuntarily annexed, and did not have a plan by which to serve all those acreage. State law says you have 2 years once you annex someone to have water and wastewater available to them to connect to at a price equivalent to other neighbors. That's impossible. We have places annexed for 15 years that it would cost them $500,000 to hook up to water. So there were all these issues, and then tons of ordinances that quite literally commercial developers said, forget it. We're going to stay in Cedar Park. We're going to Liberty Hill. And many of my friends, just from my involvement on boards and committees and all that, were like, Marci, aren't you tired of just having 3 minutes to get up there and speak? And I went, I am. But for the longest time, the biggest joke was, we'll never annex Cannon because we don't want her to run. And then jokingly, I think someone forgot. And during that grab, I got annexed. So it was like, okay, I guess I could. And really, my biggest thing has always been quality. This is my home. This is where I'm going to stay. This is where I raise my kids here. So I want to make sure that our quality is there. But I don't want unnecessary ordinances that are just, cost us out of the market for commercial development. So there's a fine balance there.
Sure. And I'm pretty consistent in when I talk about this, whether it's with you or with anybody else I've spoken with, in and out of this vehicle. It's a far more complex issue than I think a lot of people necessarily understand or maybe even research. Like if you do a little bit of digging, you can start to find these things out. Like, oh, okay, I didn't realize. Oh, I had no idea that was the issue. Oh, okay, I didn't realize that there was this impediment. When you start putting those together, it kind of becomes, like to your point, a very complex puzzle of pieces, which doesn't do the city any favors. And I always, I think it's commendable what council has been able to do. In the time that I've lived here, my experiences with council, we haven't always agreed.
And you know what? We shouldn't.
That's fine.
We shouldn't always agree, because how do we improve and help sharpen the conversation if we're always just, in agreement?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good point. I mean, I think that's a really good thing that we can do as a city and get away from some of the... I try to be real careful here, because I'm not looking to offend anybody, and I'm not pointing fingers, I'm not saying this person's right, this person's wrong. That's not the case. I think in general, the conversations need to be more open and more conversational and really, hey, okay, we're all here, we're all paying taxes, we're all doing these things. How do we work together so that everybody can at least feel like, okay, yes, I'm comfortable here. This is my, like you've been here 30 years. You call it your home, and an obvious passion in that sense. I mean, I can sense it from you, and I don't know you. Okay? I don't know you. I mean, this is really the first time we've met. I mean, yes, we've had a couple, just again, full transparency. We have had some conversation.
But you were probably wearing a mask? Or
it was either that or before COVID or whatever it may have been. So there was only that tertiary familiarity. With that said, I think it's really good that we open up the conversations and really listen to all the different people.
I agree.
Again, we don't have to agree at the end of the day, but if we don't listen, then we're not doing anything, we're not getting any growth.
Well, here's the thing. I honestly believe that everyone who serves wants the best. Now, we may disagree on how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I may need some education on, well, if you do this here, the unintentional consequences are X, Y, and Z. Because, of course, I'm very big on landowner rights.
Right.
But at the same time, you have to balance that with what can our roads handle, what can our water and wastewater and school districts. And so it is a much more complex issue. But I always believe that we can come to common ground. The thing is, right, is when you leave a negotiation, if everyone's mad, you've done well.
It's an interesting take.
Because no one's ever going to be 100% happy unless they got 100% of their stuff.
It's
so
a fair assessment.
We have to come to the middle. And that's just been my background in working, and so I kind of bring that here.
It's an interesting take. In sales, I would tend to disagree with you a little bit.
Well, sales is different.
Because we want everybody to be happy. You're trying to get
customer service,
You're trying to get to that win-win. But in negotiations, there is a little bit of give and take. So you don't get everything that you want.
Right. Because developers come in and want the moon.
Sure.
And of course, the city wants the moon.
Sure.
And so, let's bring it together.
Sure. So, one of the things that I know that you were involved with, and you mentioned it earlier, was the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
But it was the previous comprehensive
2.
plan, not necessarily the one that's in front of council now, right?
2.
So you were involved
2 times again.
So going back twice.
Yes.
Okay.
So the middle one in 2016, we had said in ours in 2008, I think.
It's every 10 years.
No, 5 years. Every 5
every
years.
5 years, okay.
We had, at that time, I was the ETJ representative because I wasn't in the city limits. And so the next time it came around, we had specifically said we want some of the people who served 5 years ago, even just 1 or 2, to continue to serve on the next one so that we get some continuity.
Yeah,
what were they
makes sense.
thinking? What,
Sure,
But at that point, the powers to be didn't want me in there because at that point I was, I think, stirring up a lot of trouble. And so now involved in this current one. And it's so critical. I think what so many people don't understand, the comp plan is our dream for the city. It sets the tone and it creates a future land use map. A lot of people get very confused that means zoning. It is not zoning. And so you have to be careful with that. No one's trying to take someone's zoning away just because the color changed on the future land use map. But what's so critical about the comp plan is that document is then used for the next 5 years to inform and create more ordinances and regulations. And so I, of course, am for less regulations, not more. But so that's why that document is so important.
I think it's interesting the fact that you bring up, obviously talking about the comprehensive plan, and going back every 5 years, an exercise that's done every 5 years, and obviously COVID put a little bit of a wrinkle into this one that normally wouldn't be had. But with that said, the continuity, I love the fact that you talked about continuity because I would agree with you 100%. I'm like, it doesn't matter if it was just that one guy that nobody liked, put him on there so at least you know what happened. But that's interesting that there wouldn't be that continuity because then you would have a similar situation 5 years later where there's no continuity. Because I know I looked at the previous comprehensive plan and I was a little bit bewildered by it because it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I could kind of understand what the thinking was, creating, again, and I'm not going to get into the technical terms here because I don't want to get into the weeds, but creating these, we'll call them
nodes.
High-density nodes or centers or whatnot. And when you look at it, you're like, okay, that kind of makes sense. I could see from a convenience factor, like, okay, these little communal groupings, if you will. But then when you zoom out and you look at how that looks on the whole map, like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. Because now I felt it complicated matters more than it helped. Although I think genuinely the ideas were like, yes, we need to have this. I think there was probably some thought towards building incremental tax revenues in each of these, by creating these nodes. I had the opportunity to speak, and again, here we go again. Alex, you're getting a lot of shout-outs. I spoke with Alex Steinberg a few episodes ago, actually before I started the Vote in Leander series. And it was super informative,
Yes.
super nice guy. But it was really interesting to hear him speak about the impact that high density, high, concentrated urban district will have on the tax base for
Absolutely.
the city. Which I know is very important.
Right.
Because one of the impediments that we have, and I'm sure that you'll agree, is the lack of tax revenue to actually fulfill some of these, like you said, roadmap or plan for the city going forward. And unless we can correct that particular issue, we're not going to be able to address the other ones.
That's right. And, if you look at our neighboring cities, they've thrived, Cedar Park, they get all the companies, all the big corporations, because they get to keep 100% of their sales tax.
Right.
And they have then used that money to buy land, to incentivize companies. We don't have that tool. And so what do we have? We have great community feel. We have great schools. We do wonderful events. And there will automatically be kind of vignette areas in the city where the Old Town and North Line, and that'll develop all over the city. And that's what's critical, because that is really our biggest sales tool. We've been trying for years to get a large campus employer. Guess what? They need roads.
Yeah, no, it's true.
And they're not going to move in on a 4-lane road. First question, how do I get to I-35?
Yep. No,
And
I've had this conversation before.
I've been working on that Hero Way realignment since 2004. And here's the sad part, is back then we had 90% of the landowners willing to donate right away. And now we don't.
But you make a really good point there, Marci. And I don't know if you're doing it intentionally or not, but I'm going to highlight
What? Okay, good. Please.
Because long-term vision in city planning is, in my opinion, it's the number one thing that you should be focusing on. I mean, and again, there's never going to be 100% agreement on how that necessarily looks or what pieces come into play to make that happen.
Right.
But I think that if everybody says, all right, long term, this is what we, because you illustrate the same point that I make with talking about Alex all the time. When I talked about Alex and the North Line project, it took him 6-7 years just to get to the point where he is now. Yeah. And he's 10 to maybe 15 years from completing the project.
Probably longer, but yeah.
Let's just say, for argument's sake, that that's a 20-year arc.
Right.
Okay? You have been involved with, from a landowner's perspective and these committees and commissions that you've served on, you've been involved with that effort for at least 20 years.
Yeah.
And to your point with the Hero Way realignment, it's still not done.
I know.
And it's been 20 years.
But 2 years ago, two and a half years ago, basically once I got on and Troy got on, I called the meeting with the county commissioners, TxDOT, Campo. We had our state reps there. We said, what's it going to take? You guys have been talking about this. What's it going to take? And there were some people in the city of Leander who did not want it. And so we let everyone at the table know we do want it. We need it. We have to have our own access to I-35.
It's two things I think come into play there, in my opinion. Just my opinion, okay? Yes, so there needs to be some access to I-35, because without that, you don't have that heavy traffic corridor. There's no way to easily access that. The changes that we see in general transportation and things of that nature, one thing that I would say for people who might have, maybe some trepidation about that project actually being completed, I'm like, okay, within the next 5 years, all those big 18-wheelers, they're going to be robots. They're going to be self-driving vehicles.
Right.
There's no question in my mind that that's what's going to happen. Maybe not 100%. There's going to be a lot of them.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the right infrastructure to support that type of vehicle, they're not going to drive that.
Right.
So you need that.
It's more of a regional approach versus the small nodes.
Sure.
And so fine, you pack in a bunch of people in a small node, but if it's only being fed by 2-lane roads, you're in big trouble.
Yeah, you don't have. And again, I can give you personal there. I brought this up. Probably shouldn't talk about this, but I'm going to.
You can cut it out,
I live in Canary. I don't edit. This is all free form. I try not to edit. I'm like, we're just having a conversation. I've only edited a little bit on occasion. But like I'm in Caneros.
Okay.
I'm at the end of Lakeline.
Yep.
Lakeline's 2 lanes from Mason.
Yes.
Okay. We have 2 developments that are coming in.
Right.
You can see what's going on Hero right now.
Right.
My question is always, hey guys, can we move some focus over here and get that to the 4 lanes that it is going to be, that we have planned for it to be.
Right.
But the plans right now don't line up with the reality, in my opinion.
Yeah, the problem always has been, and again, because we don't have enough commercial base, and we don't get to keep all our sales tax, there's not enough money really for infrastructure. So it's like always catching up. And Leander's mindset has always been developer funded. Well, what does that do? It runs off the big companies. They're like, what do you mean I have to pull a $5 million utility lines? You know, PEC, for example, if you're on this side, if you're on the west side of Reagan and the lines are on the east side, you as the developer have to bore under Reagan, bury that line all the way to your site. Okay, thanks, but no thanks. I'm out of here.
No, that's expensive.
It's very difficult. But for the first time in the history of Leander, we've initiated a transportation plan. Show us what this looks like. So for years and years, we have over 10,000 apartments that are in the queue. I mean, it's crazy.
It is a lot.
Density. The whole thought was density. How are we going to service that infrastructure? And that's not the fun kind of sexy stuff people want to talk about. It's not, I guess as politicians, we want to go do ribbon cuttings and throw out the ball, whatever it is. And that's never been why I was motivated. I was motivated because I saw, wait a minute, we're doing this much density, we're going to be in a hurt pretty soon. And that's where we are. So
and I'm glad you highlight that, because I think it's important, again, for people to understand. And again, we've gotten a little bit
I'm
away
sorry.
from Marci. That's okay. It's not your fault.
But this is my hobby.
This is what you do. Unfortunately, Marci's very two-dimensional. This is what she
that's
does.
it. That's Gave up photography.
Gave up all the other stuff.
Done with raising kids.
Else to talk about.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that people can kind of understand that, and it is some insight to the thought process.
Yeah.
Again, as a serving council member, it is a little bit different it's a different conversation because you're already involved in this. So I think, in my opinion, it's fair for me to ask some questions about, hey, what you're doing right now to help illustrate what you're doing right now. Again, not whether it's good, bad, or ugly or indifferent. It doesn't matter. What are you doing? And so the infrastructure things, I think, is always really important, and the fact that the tax base doesn't necessarily allow for the support. We gave up a big chunk of our tax revenue to the rail project, which you can look at that and say, now you look at what little future thought, and you're like, okay, North Line, now all of a sudden rail starts like, that looks really, really good. You're in a good spot. I don't know that was necessarily the plans initially.
Well, I think it was, but they thought 12, 14 years ago that a North Line and Domain was going to happen immediately.
I got you. Okay.
That was the sell to the citizens of Leander
at the time.
Is if you approve this, then all that land around there is going to increase from, being sold by the acre to being sold by the square foot. And so it was very exciting and everyone was into it. But the reality is, again, developers don't come out.
Into all of the other issues.
Yeah. They're like, you want me to pull all the utilities? You want me to, so there was.
That's interesting. And again, a good insight. And helpful that you have the purview of the experience to look at that. I mean, because most people don't know that. I mean, I know I don't.
Yeah.
And again, I like to always kind of try to talk about it from someone who's just come here. Like, I chose Leander.
Yeah.
I don't have kids. I'm not going to grow up here and all that kind of stuff. But I might grow old here.
Yeah.
And it's a nice city, and it's convenient to everything else. The train was actually one of the reasons I moved here. Because I was like, if I end up working downtown, hop on a train. I'm there. That's great. I don't have to drive my car. After living in Houston for 28 years and putting that kind of mileage on a vehicle, it was important to me. But I think I think what you taught, like just touching on the infrastructure, like the roads and the density of the apartments and stuff like that, I always frame it just a real simple way. I think it's an easy way for people to understand. For every 2 people who live in a house, there's 2 cars. Mm-hmm. Okay? So now take those 2 people, put them in 800 units, let's say, just for argument's sake.
Right.
Now you're talking 1,600 cars.
Right.
In that one space.
On 4 acres.
In and out, getting into traffic, out of traffic. Right. That's a real simple way to look at that.
That's right.
Look at all these things that are going to happen once you finish this.
Right.
Okay? In addition to the fact that you build as many as we have talked about, and I know that are online to come online and whatnot. And I've asked this question before, and I'm not asking you to answer.
Okay.
But I'm always like, does anybody know the occupancy of any of these apartment complexes in Leander?
Right now, it's full.
I mean, it's a great question, though.
Yeah.
To like, if they're full, then there's a demand. If they're not full, there's not a demand.
But here's the thing: there was this false premise that, well, we won't ever get any corporate employers without apartments. That's a false premise,
mm-hmm.
because look at Cedar Park. They
mm-hmm.
have about 5,500 apartments, and they have all the business, all the companies, all the high-tech corps, everything.
Right.
So that's kind of a false premise. Now, our occupancy is high right now, and demand is high right now.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because Cedar Park's still bringing in more
mm-hmm.
businesses and a lot of high-tech kids, millennials.
Well, the push is coming.
That's
for
right.
Sure.
So the fear is that we become the bedroom community,
mm-hmm.
and now we really don't have the taxes coming in to help for all of us to just get from one end of the city to the next.
Oh, sure. And it's legitimate. It is the reality.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any way to necessarily avoid it.
Yeah.
What we are at 50-something thousand now, and predicted probably be close to 70.
No, we're at 80.
We're at 80 already.
Yes.
Because I haven't seen the
Yeah.
census numbers. I know it was kind of.
It goes between 78 and 80.
Okay, so we're already there.
Yeah.
We're
And when I
already
moved here, there was like 10.
Yeah, I was going to say. Now, there's still signs, a few signs that are
Yeah,
permanent.
those signs are very old.
You're like, hey, there's no way. No way there's 10,000 people in this city.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so the reality is that it not only is it going to happen, it is already happening.
It already is.
And has, to a large extent, already happened.
Right.
So now it's about, how do we move forward? How do we keep going forward and make some adjustments to some decisions that may have been made that may have not been the best decisions that were made in the past.
Yeah.
But you got to kind of fix some of that stuff.
Well, the modeling,
that
a whole high density, that's usually done after the fact, gentrification or infill. But doing it from the get-go, we didn't have any modeling of water and wastewater to these sites.
Right.
The idea was just go buy more water out of the lake. Well, if you only have a 12 or 18-inch line feeding most of our city, that's not enough. Mm-hmm. So the more you dig, the more issues there are. But it sounds great and wonderful,
mm-hmm.
that we're going to have 4 domains around Leander. That's great. And it's going to take me an hour to get from Sam Bass Road to Crystal Falls.
Well, again, having come from Houston, okay,
that's normal, huh?
0 zoning, okay?
Yeah, that's right.
To me, I'm like, I would have noticed.
Yeah.
Had I gotten here a little bit later and that had happened, I would have been like, it's like Houston.
Right.
But I'm glad that it didn't, in a sense, because I think that there's a lot of things that we can take advantage of as a city as a result.
Right.
I want to thank you for the contributions that you've made to the city thus far, because I think that's it's a notable use of your time. Again, it's volunteer.
Yeah.
And nobody gets paid.
Nobody
on city
gets
council.
paid.
So I know how much time it takes, and I know those types of things. So I always like to thank people for doing that. And of course, want to give you an opportunity to tell people where they can find out more about your campaign.
Okay. I have a Facebook page. I'm not really very big on Facebook, as people may know, but you can call me anytime. Marci Cannon, Leander City Council page, Place 6.
Yeah, so you can find her on Facebook.
Yes, and website marcicannon.com.
Okay. So, Marci, thank you for your time.
That's it?
That's it.
That
We're
was
all done.
painless.
See, I
that
told
one's
you,
so bad.
You were
Okay.
nervous and there was nothing to worry
I know.
about.
Thank you very much.
No, it was really a pleasure to meet you in this way.
Likewise.
Best of luck on the campaign.
Thank you. Oh, and come eat at Sharksburger. It's really good.
Oh, yeah. Well,
It's really good.
I think everybody knows already.
I know.
I think so. I don't know. If you don't, it's Sharpsburger.
Awesome.
There's one on Reagan, there's one on Hero. And the one on Hero is in the old gas station.
Yes. It's a whole different feel. It's fun. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it. We'll see you next time.